Okay, I'm going to start by painting clouds. This is our exercise for clouds. I want you to notice that the clouds that are up high are closer to us. The ones closer to the horizon are further away, as I explained before. I know you can't see this very clearly, but I have put a copy of the photo out there for you. I'm going to start by drawing. I use French ultramarine blue and Cad Scarlet. And in this case, because we're doing clouds, and clouds tend to be a little on the bluer side, I'm going to use my mix a little to the bluer side. And I'm going to start by putting these clouds in. Now, this one's sort of in the center of the painting. Let me just move it slightly here. I'm just going to put it here. And then the next cloud is here. And it's behind this one. How do we know it's behind? Because the base of the cloud is lower in our reference field. So even if it looks like it's in front, it's behind. Okay, this cloud is further back than this cloud. As they get closer and closer to us, these bottoms that are up higher, this one is closer to us than this one. This one's further away. Same thing here. This is sort of sitting back here, and sometimes they droop a little bit into the other guy's area, but really these are just further away. And then we have clouds here on the horizon that are still further away, and then we have even more over here that are further away. We have a little building here. I'll just put the little building there so you know where it is. I don't really care about the building because we're talking about clouds. I'm just going to set that little color there and a line for the horizon. Everything down here I don't care about. Everything from this line up I do, because we're talking about clouds. There are some little wisps over here, and I'm not going to draw them in. I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to look for the dark sides of what I'm looking at, and I'm going to just go ahead and get the dark side of some of these clouds in. I got a lot of turp on there, so and again, if something doesn't look natural or right, or it doesn't look like the breakup, it looks too square or something, change it a little bit. Okay, right? If you're an artist, change it a little bit so that it does look more natural. We have a little bit of a cloud over here. I sort of ignored him, and he didn't get in the picture, so let me put him up here. He's a little guy here, and I'll stick this cloud up a little higher, okay? Also, as we go down, there's a little bit in here, a little bit in here. We see a little bit up and down in here. Something you might want to know is that the aspect ratio is probably not quite right for this object. I'm going to let them go off on the other side, even if they don't, so they attach here and we're attached here. This is a compositional thing, and I am going to go ahead and just not put a lot of dark in down here, but the sky does get a little cloudy down here, so I'm just going to sort of haze it down a little bit. I'm sorry, my board is moving. Haze it down a little, just a little bit right on the horizon, okay? And then all the stuff below that, I'm just going to add a little more Cad Scarlet too, and just paint it in so you see it as dark, so that you're not confused by what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm just going to use a little bit of this, a little bit redder version. If we want to come back and paint this later, we can. But for now, it's just the ground. Okay, and there's a barn over here. See if I can avoid painting the iPad. Okay, and a little bit in here. That's my barn. A little bit more, but it's really about the sky and the clouds. So get your drawing in. If it's too wet, like a little bit too wet, I'm going to grab a paper towel and just come in and just gently, not very roughly, just gently, you can wipe off any excess. Okay? Once you've wiped off the excess, it won't have a tendency to get in your paint anymore. And if you want, you can wait 20 minutes for it to dry. So you don't have to worry about it. If you use turp and a little bit of paint, this will all be dry in about 20 minutes. So, drawings in, you need to do a drawing so we know where things will be when we're working on our painting. Okay, the drawing's in. I know this is a straight line, but we're going to put a few wispy clouds out there. Let's start painting. Like all paintings, we're going to paint from the background to the foreground. I'm going to grab the biggest brush I have. I'm going to paint the sky first. Over here where there is a little bit of a cloud, I'm going to put that on later. I'm going to use French ultramarine blue and a little bit of the, actually mostly the cerulean with a touch of the French ultramarine and white. I'm mixing up a big pile because I have a lot to cover. I'm going to add a little liquid to it, and I'm going to keep it kind of dark for the top. So skies, I picked this reference because you can see the sky is darker, and as it goes down it gets lighter. So here's a great sky for all of you who want to practice skies. I'm just going to start at the top. I'm going to make this dark. I'm going to paint every direction. It's really important that you don't paint skies straight across. This is important because you're increasing the volume, the perception of volume in the sky. Whoops, that's not supposed to be blue. By painting it different directions. I'm putting on a lot of paint so I can paint it pretty rapidly. I'm trying to do this quick so you have a short video. I'm going to add more white to my color, and as I come down I'm just going to blend those two whites together. Okay? I'm not really liking that color very much. I'm just going to go a little more cerulean in that. Let's see if I like the color better. It's a little too French ultramarine for me. There, I like that better. You probably can't tell the difference. I can tell the difference. So, okay, and I'm going to paint right over my lines that I drew, right between the objects. Again, I'm painting really rapidly, which means I'm putting on a lot of paint. I wouldn't be doing this if I weren't doing it as a demo. I would take a little more time and try to not go quite so thickly on the first pass, but I'm doing it because I want to get this done in a rapid method. Okay, that's a little too much white. I'm going to come back and add a little more blue to it. Okay, and again, I'm just going to keep coming down. If I get lighter above, I'll just bring more white in down below. And I'm going to just keep bringing this wider and wider as we come down. I'm going to paint over all the edges where I drew the clouds. Okay, just paint over them. If you make a mistake, it's no big deal because it's going to be really nice when your clouds blend together with the sky. So again, I'm intentionally making a statement here. I'm going lighter towards the bottom, blue to white. It's a light blue down here. Actually, it's not that white, but it is a light blue. And by the time I get down here, it's just mostly white and cerulean blue. Okay. And sort of trying to again avoid the iPad. There's a few things people in this world don't like as painters, and one of them is usually getting our iPad, our iPod, whatever we're listening to, coated in paint. That's usually a pretty unhappy thing, so just try and avoid it. I'm looking in here. I probably need to come a little more in here. I'm looking between this cloud and that cloud, and there's more sky in here. A little bit coming back this way. Okay, and I'm just doing the general shapes. Okay, so oops, there's this right there that you probably can't see it. It's just a piece of dried paint, but I just want to get that in and be done. Okay, so we have sky that varies on the way down. Now this is a grayer version down here. I'll talk about that in a minute. But there's another piece of hunk of dry paint. So you just pull them out. You can wipe them on a paper towel, or me, I just wipe them on my easel. Okay? Didn't mean that. I just wipe them on my palette. Okay, sky's in. Darker blue to white, or whitish. Okay, while you weren't looking, I added some fresh white. I moved my paint mixing over. I'm going to start on my clouds. Clouds are dark on the bottom and light where the sun hits them. So this shouldn't surprise you, but the base of your clouds is a little bit violet. It's sort of a violet gray. So I just took my sky color, the color that was up here, and added a touch of alizarin crimson to them. It went really violet, which is pretty bright. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to add just a hair of the, oops, that's too much. I'm going to add, take my sky blue, add a hair of the Cad Scarlet, a hair, okay. Right now I have too much, so I have to sort of counter it by adding more blue. And I'm going to get a blue-gray. I know in your photographs it looks kind of blackish, but if you use black or that color for your sky, it will feel a little smoggy is a good word. Let me try this color. Okay, there's a gray violet, okay? And it's the bottom of my clouds. There will be some darker areas, so let's just make a darker version over here. Something a little darker. Remember, what's the complement of violet? It's yellow. This is a pretty bright yellow, and if you add it to your violet, it'll go brown pretty immediately. It's a little duller yellow. It sort of drags your color to kind of to the green side a little bit, but I'm adding enough red to counter that. I'm still getting something that looks pretty smoggy, but I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to go ahead and paint my dark colors in. And what I'm going to do, and this is probably one of the biggest things, is I'm going to keep these strokes sort of flat towards the bottom. And again, I'm going to paint this in, and I'm going to keep it kind of flat. And up on the side here, a little bit like puffy, kind of like you're painting a sphere or something. But down at the bottom here, flat. Okay, the reason clouds are flat is because they're sitting on a layer of air. Okay, they're floating on this layer of air. So this base of them wants to be really, really flat. So just, it can jog in and out. It's sort of like painting the shore of a lake. It can jog in and out, but it still pretty much wants to be kind of flat. Okay, and one of the real wonderful things about clouds is they're wispy. So when you kind of get them mushed up into your paint here that's already wet and you're like, whoa, that's going everywhere. Oh, well, no big deal, because they're clouds and they should be a little bit wispy. As we move on down, we're going to add a little more white to our cloud color, and we're still going to have our base of our clouds. I'm not sure what I did there, but oh, I see. Okay, I painted over my upper cloud part. That's okay. And here's the base of these clouds, and there's a little bit more in here, right, that goes behind the barn. And then as we move on down, we're sort of getting grayer and grayer. So I'm adding a little more of the Cad Scarlet, very little more. Please do not dig into that color. It's already strong enough. And I'm just going to come in here and sort of get this very gray on the horizon. So just as a heads up, I'm going to go a little bit whiter. Down towards the base it's a little darker, but again, just like before, I'm getting a lot. Oh, I went over the barn. Oh well. just like before, I'm getting a lot of reflection that I don't think you're getting. And a little helper here. When you're looking at colors on the opposite side of the color wheel, the blue, the cerulean blue, and the cad scarlet are nearly perfect opposites. So they're always going to make a decent gray. It's just that this is not a very powerful pigment relative to this one. This is an extremely powerful pigment. So a little bit of this will almost immediately overpower that. So it's just a hair of that with a lot of that, and you'll get your grays. Okay, so now the base of my clouds are in. Let's come back up here, not too dark, and I'm just going to paint sort of this dark area on my cloud. There's a couple little dark areas. They aren't quite as dark as the base, so I'm using the color I used down here. I mean, it's already on my brush, why not use it? And I'm going to go ahead and just throw in these slightly darker sides to clouds. Now you can see I'm just sort of treating them like maybe I would treat leaves of a tree or something. I'm just sort of poofing them in there. And we can tell our light is coming this way because this side of our clouds is lit. So I'll just go ahead and go on down and get all my little clusters of clouds dark on the far side. Alright, let's put a little more in here. Just these little things. Alright, so those are our basic structure for our clouds. Now we're coming in with the white. When we come and we grab our white, the problem with our white is it's a little cold. So you have a couple of choices here. You can take a hair of the yellow and add it to your white. That is right there way, way, way too much. It is barely a touch. So notice how I wiped it off my brush, came back and added what was left on my brush to this white. You can't probably see it at all. It just looks almost exactly the same as my regular white. It's so slightly different that in this video you can't tell that that's what I did. You could also go slightly to this color, this cad scarlet, and same thing. That little very, 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 very little touch was too much, and I can come back in and add a more white. So now I have a white that has a little bit of cad scarlet, and I have a white that has a little bit of yellow. I'll use the one with a little bit of yellow, just because of demo purposes. So when would you use a cad scarlet versus a yellow? The yellow maybe when the sun's higher, the cad scarlet as the sun starts getting lower and you get those orangier colors into your sky. Okay, I'm going to come up here, and I've already got these bases in. So here's where people have trouble with clouds. Just let it blend. Okay, we're going to just sort of let it extend out a little bit. Clouds are thick in the middle and thin on the edges. They just sort of burst out of this little thing, so you're just going to just around the edges, little parts of them, you're going to just barely touch the surface. So I'm hardly touching the surface, and you're going to just throw on a little bit. If they get too thick out on the edges, I flipped my brush there, if they get too thick out on the edges, come back to the middle, make it thicker in the middle, and just sort of spread it out on the edges. It's all nice and wet. So that makes it pretty easy. I can come in here and just sort of gently, gently, gently pull some of that stuff in. So one of the biggest mistakes people make in clouds, of course, is being not soft enough on the edges. Here, I'll just throw a little bit of light out there and sort of soften the edge. Okay, that's how we make the clouds. Now, one of the mistakes people make is either not softening the edges enough, and the other mistake they make is making them all look the same and even. So even if they look the same and even, they really aren't. So let's come up here. Let's throw this cloud in. I know there's a little bit of sky in there, but oh well. We'll just throw it right into this. We'll just mix it up. Throw a little bit of white in the middle there. Okay. And again, break it up a little bit. Try to not keep it even. This one's sort of behind this stuff back down here. So I'm going to take a little more white, a hair of this yellow that's already been stretched out across my palette. So it's not quite just that cold white. And I'm going to go ahead and I notice that there's a cloud in here that sort of comes up over this. So I'll just go right over the top. To go over the top, I'm holding my brush fairly flat. I'm barely touching the surface again. And I'm just creating that shape. I'm going to come down here. I'm looking down in this area. And these clouds just really aren't that dark, that low. So I'm kind of getting a little too much paint on my brush. When you get too much paint on your brush like I have right now, one of the things I suggest is taking your palette knife, sort of pushing it back onto the palette. Okay, so I didn't lose any paint. It's on the palette now. I can just get it back up to the tip of my brush, and now I can come back in here and sort of reuse that paint that I just pushed off. Okay, and these are sort of fluffy clouds. They're not quite that dark as I made them underneath. So, lighten them up. We paint dark to light. So now I can kind of come in with the brush I have and lighten all that stuff up. Again, same thing again, a little more and a little more. And just prevent yourself from being even. Prevent it from all looking the same. Again, it's not quite that dark down here. Remember, the photo isn't perfect. I'll just soften them a little bit more. A little more liquid, a little more white. Come out here. Try to keep them uneven. If they look too even, and you're going to have to stand back to find out, and I'll stand back in just a minute. I'm going to just keep doing that. Now, at this point, I have some paint on my brush. Go ahead, throw that loose little cloud in out here. Okay, just let him drift in. There's a few other little specks in the sky here. Just, if it's too much, I can come back and paint it over the blue. Okay, and then as we go down, we're going to add a little more violet to our white. Not a lot, just a little bit. Because as they move back, we will see less and less of a value change back in here. And we'll see just these little dots of white. We see mostly white up in here. Don't make it too even. And little poofs out on the horizon, right to my house here that I sort of overpainted. And then as we come down, again, sort of going a little more gray in the distance with some little bits of white in between. So we're going to keep putting that in. And that in. Okay. And then as we go down into this area, don't get too white. Just sort of paling it out. Put that house in a second. And I'm letting a lot of the background color come through. Why? Because the background color is sort of that burnt sienna. And it will help dull or dim what you're looking at on my painting. Okay, so little touches, little mixing up of the paint, little getting rid of hard lines, a little just softening around, and keeping things uneven. Nature is just not as perfect as we like her to be. She doesn't line the books up on the shelf. She likes to let them kind of flop around. Okay, and pretty much my clouds are done. I have a house here and a foreground I'm not going to worry about. So this is it. I'm going to stand back. I'm going to check. From here I can see there's a big thick blob of paint there. Maybe I'll leave it, maybe I won't, but I'm going to check. Okay, I grabbed another brush. I come back to my sky color, and now I can touch up anything in here that I think is, oh, that's overdone, I should have done fewer. So just like leaves on a plant, or other things, your clouds should sort of connect. If you do this, they look too even and they look dotty. Okay? So anytime that happens, you have one of two choices. You can tie things together so they don't look so separate, or you can come back and paint out the ones that didn't work and change the shapes so they don't look similar. If you're having trouble telling if they're similar, use a mirror and look over your shoulder and see, or turn it upside down, or squint. I squint to see if things look too similar. I paint, and when I'm painting I squint, and I squint and I pull little and when I squint so far so that all I can see is the shape, and I make sure the shape looks right to me. If the shape doesn't look right, change it. Okay. Like I said, I'm not going to add the barn at the bottom. I'm just doing little touch-ups. I'm not putting my iPad there again. That didn't work so well. Okay, and there's my barn. Paint over that if I wanted. Little touches, little things that you need to fix and changes. If you got too light, you can always come back and go dark. I can do two things. I can bring light in and poof that cloud out, and I can bring some dark in. I'm using French Ultramarine, Cad Scarlet, and if I feel like, oh, there was a spot in here that needed to get darker, I could put it back in. Remember, you can work back and forth. So if it's too dark now, oh, let me just touch that up. I'll just bring some more light back in. Okay, a little bit of light, a little too much blue. Let me come back to the cloud color, paint over that. Okay, if you can't get the paint on, it's not going on, you feel like it's too thick, notice how flat I'm laying my brush to the surface. Notice how I'm just barely touching and laying it on top. But if you can't do that, you can just wait till it's dry, or you can scrape it. And that's what your rubber tool's for. Okay, I think down here, it's a little more white across the top here. Anyway, there are your skies, there are your clouds. I guess the last thing on clouds is sometimes there's a lot of color in them. And if you want, when you paint them, instead of painting them plain like I did, I'm going to come into this Cad Scarlet with white. You can bring color into your clouds. Clouds are sort of fun. They reflect the surface of the planet. They reflect the sunset. So if you wanted to, you could bring a lot of color. Again, I'm taking this, it's a flat brush. It's a number 8. And I'm using liquid or some kind of medium to thin it up. And I'm just coming flat over the surface of sort of where in between the light and the dark. Okay, I'm sort of going in between the light and the dark. And I'm just bringing a little more color into my clouds to make them more interesting. And again, I'm staying away from the very flat colors. If you use French Ultramarine Blue and Cad Scarlet, you'll get some color in. If you use French Ultramarine Blue and Burnt Sienna, your clouds they'll look flat. They'll look dirty and flat. Okay, so I can add some color in here if I want. It gives it sort of that option of being a little more of a sunset. And I can also, you can also go more yellow if you wanted to push a color, or pink. You know, I could push a little more yellow in here. I'd be careful not to overdo it, but I would add the color on that first pass instead of trying to add it in afterwards. But as you can see, it changes the appearance of the painting. All right, it makes it look a little more like a sunset, right? So, and as a little more like a sunset, this looks a little less. Okay, so soft edges, light to dark, flat on the bottom, generally flat. Pay attention to your shapes. Don't overpaint them. Have fun painting clouds.